here with Dylan DuFresne, and this is Abel Ara. And for those of you guys that have been following my VAR journey, stick around. We're gonna take questions at the end of this live stream. Today, we're here to talk about ProveIt, the ProveIt Conference 2026. But first, let me bring on Dylan. Dylan, welcome today. You're muted, Dylan.
I don't think we're live.
Yeah, we're live. We're live.
Okay.
We got one live viewer.
Okay. Cool.
Dylan, right. where let us know, Dylan, where are you guys joining from today? If you're joining us live, let us know in the chat where you guys are joining from. Dylan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to seeing where everyone's joining us from and to go over the architecture and all that.
Yeah, so ProveIt, if you want to bring up the screen, ProveIt is a conference that I'm really excited that we're going to be a sponsor of, Abel Ara, and we'll get into what Abel Ara is. And, like I said, we're going to take questions at the end. This live stream is meant to demonstrate and show off what we're going to be developing for ProveIt. So ProveIt is the Industry 4.0 community conference that you need to be at. It's February 16th through 20th, 2026 at the Hyatt Regency in Dallas, Texas. Again, Abel Ara is going to be a silver sponsor of the conference. So we're very excited to be demonstrating and presenting to a live audience at ProveIt. You'll have to forgive Dylan. He's a little new. He's never done a live stream before, so he's a little nervous. But that's why we're kind of doing this to practice and get more presence with our, get more people on, get more eyes on ProveIt, right? So, what is ProveIt? It's the showcase where vendors in industry that help serve manufacturers show off their solutions in a live virtual factory to actually prove that they can do what they're talking about, not just fancy PowerPoints and sales pitches, but actual technology. The first ProveIt conference was in 2025. Earlier this year, it feels like it was last year, but ProveIt 2025 was a groundbreaking conference. There was over 600 attendees, and more than 60% of them worked for a manufacturer or an end user. And that is kind of one of the focuses of this conference. So if you work for a manufacturer or an end user, you could get a 50% discount. But don't worry, if you don't work for a manufacturer or an end user, you're a consultant, you're a system integrator, or you're another vendor, you need to be at ProveIt too. You could use our coupon code ABELARA to save 25%. So you can use that coupon code to save 25% on your registration. If you are an end user, you could get applied. There's a qualification process. You have to fill out some forms. They're really looking for to fill the entire venue with the most qualified end users. You could still use our coupon code. You just put it in the referral section. Tell them ABELARA told you about ProveIt. So we're really looking to, get the word out about ProveIt. The very first ProveIt conference was a huge success. That success translated into ProveIt showcase at ICC this year. So if you didn't attend the Ignition Community Conference, it was the largest. It was the largest that it's ever been, and it was at the Safe Convention Center in downtown Sacramento. And there was like over 1,000 people. ProveIt had its own entire showcase at ICC, and so now it's going to be even better in 2026. So definitely don't wait to pick up your tickets, and you want to book a hotel room at the Hyatt Regency. So you want to be at the convention center. It's going to be huge. This is the iconic, ball in downtown Dallas, February 16th through 20th. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Dylan, let's get into the architecture now that I've gotten the marketing pitch out of the way. If you guys have any questions about ProveIt or using our coupon code, definitely leave them in the chat. But let's jump into the architecture review.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to go over today the planned stack for what we're going to do. We haven't seen the broker yet or the data, so some of this is a little presumptuous. But this is going to be the plan that uses the tools that we know to use to solve the most problems we can in the most efficient ways possible. So at a very high level, we've chosen a handful of different vendors and tools to showcase. And we have chosen each one of them for a very specific reason in the stack. For your real world factory, you may or may not have all of these. You're probably going to have a subset, but for the sake of the demo for the show, we're going to show you how everybody works together and how everything ties in nice and clean together. So at a high level, we'll start on the plant floor.
Real quick though.
Yeah.
Remind us of the four rules. Like what makes ProveIt different. What makes ProveIt different is the four rules. Like what is it that us as a vendor we have to accomplish as part of this ProveIt session? Really the two things. But I'll start. Number one, we're focusing on an actual problem that the manufacturer has of this virtual factory, of this live data set, an actual problem. And then number two is explaining how you solved it, which is our staple of solutions here. And we're going to talk about that. But what are the main two the ones that vendors normally don't want to share? What are the two requirements of our ProveIt session?
The price and the timeline, right? How long it took and how much it cost.
Exactly. How long it took, how much does it cost? Which is really what makes ProveIt different. Not only it's the live demos and the community, but it's also the transparency. So
and on this one today, we're going to focus on how we solved it or how we think we're going to solve it. Once we get the broker, we know who the customer is, then we can focus on which problems we're solving. We're only mandated to solve one problem. We're going to solve a lot more than that. Way more than that. And then once we know which problem
so don't make
solved,
I was going to say, just make sure to subscribe because we are going to be doing more content as more information about the ProveIt broker and the live data sets as it comes out. We're going to be doing more content to keep you guys updated on the development process, kind of showing you behind the scenes of how it works. But sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're good. And the main point of this one for today is this is our upfront plan on day 0. Everything we show you might change as we identify the real problems and as we identify the scope and schedule and budget of how to solve those problems. But for complete transparency and accountability, this will serve as documentation for what we intended from day 1. And we'll see how far we deviate when we find the real problems and get to the end. The budget and the timeline will vary depending on how many and which problems we choose. So once we know how many of these tools we need to deploy and how many locations, in a later stream, we can talk about budget. But for now, we're going into art of the possible, high level. Here's all the tools in our toolbox and how we believe they can solve certain problems.
Awesome. So why don't you zoom in, because it's really kind of hard to see, especially if people are on their phones. Zoom way in on there and let us kind of give us an idea of what we're going over here. Because this is one of my first times seeing it as well, too. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. So first, we're going to start. I'm just going to name each of the vendors we're talking about here, which stacks we're doing. We haven't talked to all of them yet, so hopefully they're on board for licensing and demo purposes. We'll get there soon, but we'll start on the plant floor. The very beginning of this is at the device layer, the actual controllers that can be running your equipment in the closed loop. So Opto22, depending on the view on the live stream here, you may be able to see the controller behind me, maybe not. But Opto22 running on the edge, providing real-time factory data up the stack. And that is our device layer, L0, L1. From there, the next list of tools is we'll go into the Y in a little bit. But we've chosen Ignition as our on-site, on-premise visualization platform and just general Swiss Army knife that can solve a little bit of everything. Our local database solution is chosen to be Timescale DB, more specifically Postgres, and with some Timescale DB extensions sprinkled in. And then Flow Software. That is going to be our on-premise and deep analytics engine that's going to tie our different data stores together. One of which will be Timescale DB Postgres here. The other one will be the time series database, the historian, proper process historian, Timebase, another product by Flow Software. And we'll go into the difference between Timebase and Timescale and how we intend to use them differently in a second. But from there, the next layer here on the second site, we're also going to be using Litmus Edge for device connectivity, for UNS and data pipes. There's a little bit because this is going to be a multi-site problem we're going to solve. So we're going to solve different problems in different ways on different sites when we start talking about the lower levels of the stacks here. And with that, Litmus is going to stand alone on one of those sites as the sole data pipeline. With both sites, we'll utilize HighByte potentially to be the data ops. So we can get the data from Ignition, Timescale, Flow Software, Timebase Historian, and all of that using HighByte and or Litmus to get the data and pipe it, contextualize it, model it, and bring it to the unified namespace. This is the HiveMQ broker that is provided as part of the event, the unified namespace that every vendor will share. Off of that unified namespace, now we're in higher levels of the stack here. We have MaintainX as our CMMS solution, showing maintenance functionality within the operation stack and how it ties into the unified namespace. And we have a couple partners that are yet to be announced that you'll have to stay tuned to find out more about. But with that, once we get above the site level, this is where things get interesting because we have multi-site.
All right, let me jump in there. Let me jump in here
before what do you got?
Before we get to multi-site.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the main differences also of the ProveIt infrastructure in 2026 is it is a multi-site virtual factory, whereas 2025 was a single site manufacturing facility. One quick question is, are all of these people sponsors of the ProveIt conference? Like, pull up the sponsors page real quick so we see. And yeah, like all of these companies are already sponsors.
This was a coincidence. We came up with this stack and this solution before the vendor list was public at ProveIt. And by chance, we happened to use all 8 of the title sponsors, Inductive Automation, both of the title sponsors, Inductive Automation and Litmus, as well as all 6 of the gold sponsors, Flow Software, Fuuz, Google Cloud, HiveByte, HiveMQ, and MaintainX. We're there as a silver sponsor, some of our friends in the systems integrator space, and specifically, we're likely to utilize Portainer to deploy some of this, and we're using Opta22 on the edge. So every single vendor that you see in this stack, by chance or maybe by design, but it wasn't intentional, maybe it's just living in the same circles, that we know that we can use to prove that we know what we're doing and how we can solve solutions for the end users. Every single one is already on that list. So we won't be
pull up our agenda. Pull up the agenda for today. Pull up the agenda just real quick so we make sure we stay on track. So we do have a full outline for today's live stream, but one of the so we're working over the problem, which we talked about architecture walkthrough. Yeah, we are running a little bit ahead. One quick question.
Yeah.
So we asked, are all of these people sponsors? We still have one to be determined. The purple one right there in the middle, that's the HiveMQ unified namespace.
Yes.
Got it.
This is the HiveMQ ProveIt broker.
Okay. So this is just the general way that these different building blocks kind of snap together in order to build out and hit different use cases. Like, you may not necessarily have each one of these pieces at every site. Is that kind of the idea, or?
That is the idea. So for a real world deployment, you're likely not going to have every single one of these on every site. But for the sake of the demo here and to show the art of the possible, we've thrown them all into the demo to see which problems they solve and where they shine. And then when you come to ProveIt, you can ask us what worked well, what didn't, and where we would use different things in different ways.
So to be cheeky or to be coy, where does Ableara fit into this stack?
Ableara fits into this stack as your partner who knows the full stack. So as Walker often says, it's full stack fluency, it's education, and we are your partners who know how all these different puzzle pieces fit together and more. This isn't all we know, as well as the business itself, the business logic, the business requirements. Glenn Gardner, who will be on future calls, our co-founder, is a lot more technical on the high levels of the business strategy and finances and all of the operations and politics and relationships that go on behind the scenes that technology fails to realize. So not only do we understand the full stack of the technology, we understand the full stack of the culture, the people, the processes, and the technology of the business. And then once we identify all that, we can help you know what to put where and how it all ties together to solve problems for you, your people, your processes, using the technology as tools.
Excellent. Better than I could have put it. I'm just trying to get as much attention on you. Like, so for those of you guys that don't know, Walker is talking about Walker Reynolds, which if you guys don't know, I'd be questioning if you've been living under a rock, but he was the founder of 4.0 Solutions and IIoT University, but more importantly, he was the creator of the unified namespace architecture, and he created the ProveIt conference. I was also kind of part of that journey, helping him with digital media and building out the podcast and the content. I was also a huge believer in the idea of the community conference. So the ProveIt conference has a special place in my heart. So it is awesome to be on the other side of the table now as a vendor at the conference. So, but shout out to you guys if you guys are joining our live stream. This is our first live stream. So to have, a handful of people here joining live today, thank you for taking time out of your day. Or if you're watching the recording, put your questions down in the comments below. If there's any areas of the architecture you'd like us to focus on, or if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll answer all of the questions at the end or answer any questions that come after the fact. And quick shout out, because this is what we do, if you have any further questions, we do have a link where you can book a limited, there's a limited amount of calls that you could book with Dylan to discuss your architecture or to discuss your needs. We call it like an architecture review. So if you've been working on a project or you're thinking about using some of these solutions, we're happy to jump on a no obligation free discovery call to help see if what would work best for you. And Dylan is one of the best solutions architects on the planet. So there's that. So
yeah. So I guess let's finish the architecture review. We got a little bit ahead of ourselves off script there, but we'll go into the details of each of these and the problems later. We'll finish off the quick teaser with the multi-site deployment. That's where Fuuz comes in. It's going to be a newer name to a lot of people in the operations space and even in the 4.0 space. They've been making a lot of buzz lately. And we'll talk about how they make the multi-site deployment, the IT-friendly, the red namespace, easy to manage, not only for the operations teams who need to build applications in it, but also for the IT teams and the CIOs who need to maintain consistency and, keep everything going forward. Make sure the data has the genealogy it needs and all of that. And
you're talking about Fuuz?
Fuuz, yes. Yep. And then from Fuuz, once all the data is cleaned, consistent, we've made sure it's all the right data. That's where we can start piping our data to Google Cloud for further warehousing and analytics. And
awesome.
Again, to be announced will come soon. I guess anything else to go over, Zach, before we dive into the deeper technical side of this about why we chose what? And
we had a quick question come in on YouTube. We're also live on LinkedIn. So if you're joining us on LinkedIn, shout out. Why time-base and timescale at the same layer in the stack? How do they work together?
Yep, and we'll get to that one when we go into the deeper one. There's a very specific reason there, but to jump the gun, we'll get to that in a couple minutes.
Awesome. Great question. Let's get into it.
For sure. So on the primary site over here, we'll start on site A. The red side is the cloud, and edge B is on the second site. So starting here at the edge, we're doing a little bit of cheating here because we don't have real controllers. We're putting all of our data is coming from this UNS broker. So we're taking our edge data from that broker right here and piping that into our edge area gateways. This brings us to our first tool of the stack from the bottom up here is Ignition, specifically Ignition Edge, likely IoT licenses, but we'll determine if we need HMIs or things as the problems present themselves. Ignition Edge allows us to have local connectivity on IPCs, industrial computers that will live on the plant floor, likely in a control panel or an IT panel sitting on the floor there. They're the ones with the big metal fins and the fans that you'll see if you start looking for them. And each one of those will represent a different area or a different line in your plant, depending on the specific needs. And that will allow us to have this functionality at the edge to ensure consistency and connectivity and reduce latency at the edge. So with that, those go up to our main Ignition server. And this is something new as of Ignition 8.3 that we're doing to make some of the DevOps functionalities they're talking about a little bit easier. So I'm going to deviate a little bit and spend some time on why we have a tag server in Ignition.
Real quick though, just dive back in, zoom in a little bit more to the edge.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, give us an idea really quickly about what the edge data is. I know we don't have the actual data, but in a general in manufacturing environment or a plant, what is edge data? And then also I want to talk about the gateways too.
Yeah. So your stereotypical piece of the edge data is going to be everything coming from your actuators and your sensors, all your instrumentation. It's going to be the stereotype is going to be pressure, temperature, flow. It's also machine state. It might be, if you're in more discrete, you might have like spindle speeds. You're going to have what recipes are happening, what's actually running on the plant floor. It's all of that telemetry, all that scalar data that's coming from your controllers, your sensors. It's your servos, it's your amperage, it's your whatever you have coming from the controller that is running that process, or other instrumentations and sensors to collect real world data that you need
Okay.
to mean other things.
So this could be one PLC, this could be many PLCs, or this could be a
Yeah.
series of other smart devices and or sensors.
Yeah.
So then on the area gateway, so this is kind of to align to your ISA 95 format, your enterprise site area.
Mm-hmm.
So this is your area within the facility. So like
Mm-hmm.
at last year's ProveIt conference, this would have been like the printing area, the press area, the lamination area, the slitting area, which were all areas, literal areas within the plant that they did different processes. Or you said it might also be a line. Is an
Yeah.
IPC, like an industrial PC, is Ignition Edge running like installed on that, like on a Windows IPC, or is it like running in like a Docker container?
It could be any of those. I mean, Ignition will run on Linux, Windows, Mac. It'll run in a Docker container. You can run it on Kubernetes. With the Edge applications, the most common one that I've seen lately is running on an Ubuntu server or Ubuntu desktop, depending on if you have front-end requirements or not. It just gets rid of a lot of the overhead with Windows and allows you to utilize the computer a little bit better with the resources at hand, especially in a limited environment. But there are Edge IoT versions of Windows you could use just as well as. Typically, that's going to be determined by the IT team and what they're most comfortable with and securing. With that, So with that, my most common one is bare metal or Docker on Linux.
I would definitely avoid Windows Compact Edition or Edge. I would avoid that if that wasn't clear.
Yeah, usually we don't run into that. Sometimes there are IT departments that would prefer it, and it'll work just fine on any of those deployments that you could foresee.
Excellent.
And then the reason for area versus line is going to be dependent on the size, scale, and requirements of the controlled systems. These can be HMIs, they can be just data collectors. So depending on how you lay them out and depending on your process, you might do it per line or per area. And there are sometimes you might only have one per site, depending on what the requirements are.
Awesome. So what other containers would you be running on those Edge gateways?
On these Edge gateways, typically nothing else, just Ignition.
Just Ignition Edge,
typically.
Running in Docker or bare metal.
Yeah, typically nothing else on that Edge point. So any questions on the Edge further? I'm not watching the chats yet, so.
We had Ricardo say from Tupinix, I have a feeling about time base for process telemetry data, trending purposes, and timescale for MES with Postgres as a RDBS, a relational database for transactional data.
Yeah.
At the Edge. Are you talking about at the Edge, Ricardo? I could see a scenario where you're putting a time-based collector at the Edge, or maybe maybe a broker.
Yeah, there are times where you might have a time-based collector on here, depending on how you have it. There might be times where you have a full historian at the Edge if you have enough data to warrant that.
Oh, but I'm sorry. The Edge. What is the Edge gateway right there, though? So you got the area gateway.
So this is Fuuz. We'll get there later. This is all color coded.
Oh, that's the Fuuz. That's the Fuuz Edge gateway. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Some vendors like to use the same terms to mean different things, and one of the most confusing terms in our industry is the word edge. As depending on who you ask, you're going to get 100 different definitions. So when a product labels itself as edge, you have to know what they mean.
Got it. Because in some areas, like particularly the cloud, the edge is the line between the plant.
Yeah.
Like the entire plant is the edge. Whereas in this case, the edge is like on the machine level or the area level.
Typically, edge is shorthand for as far into the stack as I care to look. So to somebody that might be the PLCs and the instrumentation, it might be a SCADA system, it might be the entire site, it might be anything in the middle.
Okay.
So
we're showing a full stack, or are we only showing up? We're only showing up to layer. We're not showing ERP in this stack.
We're showing everything up to a ERP. We're talking with one of our partners about ways to show ERP use cases here as well. And we'll see what that looks like in future videos.
shameless plug. We're doing a webinar showing how to connect ERP with Fuuz to your MES and to your plant floor. So you could go to we'll leave a link to that to register for that webinar. But yeah, the answer is in this stack, we're showing almost a full stack, but we do full stack implementations all the time.
Yes. So this gets us into the most nuanced part of this discussion, and that is how we're utilizing ignition architecture here. It's not a traditional scale out. It's not a traditional IoT or hub and spoke architecture. We're utilizing what I'm calling the tag server here, and that holds all of your current tag state information so that when you're doing DevOps in any of these gateways, you can take them down for changes with a full separation of concerns without affecting the live tag state of the other systems. So with that, the tag server is kind of the single source of truth for the plant floor. It is this, in some cases, you could even call this the site level UNS right here. This is where the single source of truth for all current state data on the site is living right now. It happens to be in the OPC tag server of Ignition rather than MQTT, which is a nuance we'll get into later when we talk about the UNS broker and MQTT up here. But this is where all of our current state, especially around the site level Ignition infrastructure, lives. And all of our other functions reference that data to get their state, to get their tags. And now we can start to get into the MES side, and we'll come back down the stack to SCADA here in a second. With that, talking about the Postgres databases over here, timescale and time series historian with timescale or time base, which are funnily too close of names, so I'm going to mix them up all day long. So off of our tag server, which is our single source of truth for all of our current states, we're going right into our process historian. That process historian in timescale or time base, so that.
Sorry. All right. Let's get us. All right. Blue is our historian. Are we using Flow Software's time base, or are we using
Flow Software's time base historian?
Tiger data. Tiger data makes time base.
It's all of our telemetry, our scalar data. It's all of your instrumentation readings. It's all of your in-flight just streamed telemetry. So that will be every time you get a new temperature reading, it's going to log it to that. Every time you get a new pressure, a spindle speed, an amperage, all of that's going right into that time series database, the historian time base. And that is in here as a time series data store.
And that's the full stack there. Data. That's both the collector, the historian, and your explorer. And so then the layer above it is flow software, or
so because we're using our tag server here and we have Ignition, time base historians Ignition module will allow Ignition to view it as any other historical data source, whether it's the internal database. So this Ignition just sees this as another historian that Ignition has access to because we're using the Ignition module. If we weren't using Ignition, we could use the collector to get data from another OPC server or an MQTT broker. But in this case, we don't need a collector because we've got the module. So we're dumping it straight from Ignition into the database. And then off of here, in here, we also would probably include the Explorer, which would be a nice way to view and model and just kind of play ad hoc with the data outside of Ignition. All of that is...
The top one is Flow Software.
This is Flow Software itself. We'll get there in a second.
Flow Information Platform.
Yeah. So with that, we've got the tag server goes to the MES backend, and this is our MES database. Our MES database is built on Postgres and utilizes a lot of the functions of timescale for compression, hypertables, partitioning, all of that stuff. And this isn't just streamed telemetry data. That's all in time base. So what we're using timescale for is for proper compression on some of our event data, a lot more transactional looking events. So like a machine state change might be represented in both just by nature, but it'll never be different. This one will have all of your context. So as we're logging things, it has the context of, yes, it was this tag it came from, but this tag has this ID, name, and description. It was running this product in this moment, and it's all the extra state that's being logged with that event in a table, more of a tabular form.
Let me see if I could dumb it down a little bit. Because if anyone has never built an MES, that went way over their head.
Yes.
So essentially what Dylan is saying is we're storing the data in a relational database in a way that allows us to calculate MES, to calculate availability, to calculate performance. When we did the MES bootcamp, that's where we met at IIoT University. Shout out. No, not sponsored. When we met in the boot camp, like we were building an MES, in Ignition, right? And so the difference between using time series data to view a trend, what you would do in, time base and flow, is not what you would do like in a relational database that's more that we're storing the data to calculate MES functions.
Yep.
So how do you separate MES functions that you would do in that custom database versus what you would do in Fuse?
Yes. So that is the red versus blue namespace conversation we'll get to when we start talking about the enterprise layer.
Okay.
So with that, the bigger question to start with is what's the difference between MES core and MES custom on the local MES instance here?
Yeah.
Because this is going to get a little bit more confusing once we start talking about the fact that there's a difference between the local on-premise MES and the enterprise MES. There's going to be a difference in those. So the MES core is all of our core MES functions that we are trying to standardize on between sites or deployments. It is all of the red data in that namespace, but still in the blue area. And red and blue, all that depends on which frame you're looking at it from. So from an MES local side here, all of our agreed upon, every site has this function, is going to be in the core database. And the custom database is your ad hoc. We can just start adding stuff. We can play with tables, do what we need to do to solve our own problems on this site locally and with a level of agility that you can only do as the frontline worker. But it keeps that separation of all of our core functions can be version controlled and maintained over here, while you have the sandbox over here to build on top of. And that brings us to Flow Software. The actual software, not the company name, is our analytics framework here that is connected to our MES custom, our MES core, and our time-based historian. And this is the engine that allows all of these disparate data sources, and on a real brownfield site even more, all these different stovepipes to be brought together to have the timestamps made consistent, to contextualize that data, to model that data in a way that we can then calculate KPIs and do a lot of the functionality in a way that can be traced back and can
Real quick.
Yeah.
Why is because I was looking at the analytics. By the way, we got to add labels on this. Like I know we have the key and blue is, but we got to add labels on this. But so where Flow analytics framework is, I see how it's connected to like the back end. But why are the connection? Because I was like, at first I was looking, I'm like, I don't see that Flow's connected to the MES core or custom, and that's because those connections were yellow. Is there a reason why they're yellow, or should they be blue? Because isn't Flow is instantiating the connection to the MES core and custom database, just like how the MES, the Ignition MES backend is orange. That's how okay. All right. I'm just making sure I'm not crazy, but maybe it's a little nitpicky, but that's one of the things we pride ourselves on at Abelara is like our attention to detail, not just in architecture, but in also our design. So,
Yeah. So yeah, this has access to all of the data stores as well as the live data from the tag server from the OPC connection to the Flow software analytics over here. The unified analytics framework, as you'll hear them say. And then here we have the data coming back to us in our MES backend where you can use it for MES functionality. I should probably make this a bidirectional arrow where it can go from here to the main tag server as well. But yeah. And then
I think the color of the lines really makes sense of who, like your data ops is HiByte. So like I could see HiByte's connected to your time base, your Fuse, Edge Gateway, and your Ignition tag server. Like boom, Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, the one we kind of glossed over here is your more traditional SCADA functions. So this is where you would have SCADA screens, operator interfaces, and much more plant-centric local operation screens. You may or may not have this in more of a discrete setting, but in a hybrid or a process situation, you're definitely going to have both. And one of the things here that I think separates us from some people recommending things is we are using vision for SCADA and perspective for MES. So our SCADA screens being multi-monitor and local requirements. So vision specifically, when we're talking about ignition, is running in Java, which is maybe a little bit too technical, but that gives us access to the underlying operating system that that client is running on. It's running scripts locally on that client and operating on that client. And that operating system access gives us access to things like serial ports, MAC addresses, unique identifiers, multi-screen support in a way that you just can't do with a browser. That makes traditional SCADA applications much easier and opens doors for things that just simply aren't possible. So if you've got a serial printer or a serial barcode scanner, things like that, you can do that much easier with Vision than you can Perspective. But on the flip side, with Perspective on the MES side of things, when you're looking at it in a browser, you don't want to have everybody installing a client on every machine. It's going to be on your office network. There's more security requirements. More people need access to it, especially if you start talking about remote connectivity and things like that as you have employees working from home or on the weekends. And this allows it to run in a browser. All of your functionality runs back on the back end versus the front end. And with that, you have the capabilities of the browser, you have the flexibility of the browser, and a lot of the built-in security of the browser. And that is that security and requirements of the browser are the double-edged sword that removes some of the functionality that you have in Vision when it comes to the operating system access.
Awesome. I do like how those arrows are pointed from MES core to MES front end in such a way that you could tell it's view only, like you're only displaying data from the MES core database on the MES front end in Perspective, but the back end is clearly the one doing a bidirectional communication with the back end.
Yeah. So all of our functionality is happening in the back end, and the front end is just for display purposes. Where SCADA is a little bit different. We're not writing to the MES core databases. We're not doing any writing to those functions. So we're getting our tag data, and we have access to read context from those databases, so we can show things to the operators as needed on the plant floor.
If SCADA were to write to like MES, it would do it through the back end.
It would do it through tags. It would go through the back end and go through there. Separation of concerns, keep things clean.
Real quick, stop sharing real quick. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure we're sticking on time today.
25 minutes left, so we're good there.
Okay. And what do we have left in our demo to go over? We kind of really looked at the site level. We were going to, just because I wanted to say, like, at first, when I first looked at the architecture, my initial impression was this is way too complicated. Why not just do everything? Admittedly, I'm like, why not just do everything in one ignition broker? We're going to answer that question, but I do want to say, after looking at the architecture more and seeing the diagram, it is growing. It's definitely growing on me, and I can see why you would want to separate those concerns so you can troubleshoot things better. You can run things more performantly. You can have better security, and ultimately unlock more scalability. But yeah, take it away, Dylan. I just wanted to say that.
Yep. So we're getting close to the multi-site piece here. So there's a lot more happening at the edge. On the surface,
we do have an edge question that came in from Tupanix. Which, by the way, Tupanix is our system integrator partner who is helping us on this. So, but he said, "Are we doing any ETL?" We have an edge question. Are we doing any ETL, which is extract, transform, and load, to a database at the edge, transforming raw data, which he called bronze, before bringing it into the tag server? Interesting. I never heard of raw data called bronze, and then real quick, also, Dylan, for anyone who doesn't know, what is the high level of between red and blue namespaces?
The blue namespace is ad hoc, flexible, and allows people to solve their own problems. And the red namespace is structured and consistent and version controlled so that it can be useful for the enterprise.
Excellent. All right. So, but to answer Ricardo's question,
So Ricardo's question perfectly tees up the next step here, because everything we talked about now, I would consider bronze data, maybe silver at best. If we're talking the medallion architecture, that's probably a different conversation. But it's a good
quick, what is bronze? What are those colors?
So it's the medallion architecture it's a way to describe the flow of data So you start with bronze. It's raw, mostly uncontextualized data. You go to silver where you're adding context, and then gold is like your gold standard. This is data that's genuinely useful. The theory through there is that you've got genealogy and traceability through where that data came from. The reality usually gets a little muddier.
My first initial impression, I never heard that one before. My first initial impression is I don't like that analogy, but
yeah, it's a common analogy, a common thing in the data science world. You'll hear it a lot.
got it. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yep. So with that, let me share the screen again.
In my head, though, you could kind of make sense of it if bronze is edge data, then your blue is your silver and red is gold in that case, right? To map to relate the two. Okay.
Yeah. And
all right,
the
let's
red and
dive
blue
into
is
it.
simpler 2 poles, and there's a spectrum in the middle there that gets muddy, where they have silver in the center. But with that, let's get into the ETL piece here, because this is where we have HiByte doing our data ops, connecting to all of our data stores, connecting to our tag server, and having full access to the full context of our edge data. With this, we are using HiByte to connect to our tag server with the Ignition module and contextualize model ETL, basically everything from our local site data, clean it up, contextualize it, model it, and keep it consistent before publishing it out to our UNS broker. So depending on which frame of reference you want to use, this might be taking bronze to silver, and the UNS in this scenario is what I would call the silver data. Separate from there,
yeah, just a quick side note, we should stick with red and blue just because that's too many. I hear Glenn in the background just saying that's one too many analogies to follow. Let's keep it that is also
Yep, but to answer Ricardo's question, that's where we're at.
Blue.
Yeah. To answer Ricardo's question, and he has the more technically accurate terminology there, but we'll go back to the red and blue namespaces here. And with that, the UNS broker is kind of that middle ground right now. We have that data. It's somewhere between red and blue right now. It's anybody can publish to it. It's what it is. It's the blue namespace.
This is on. There's one of these per enterprise. Is this on site or is this in the cloud?
That's going to depend on how you architect it. In this scenario, there's going to be one for the enterprise.
Which is
if you want to look at it, yeah.
That's going to be the HiveMQ.
Yes, our site UNS by function is our Ignition tag server. So a second one would likely be redundant unless we had a bunch of IoT sensors that used MQTT or some other protocol like that to do the same function. At which point we could use the MQTT broker built into HiByte to do some of that, depending on the level of needs.
Since there's a lot of definitions out there about UNS or unified namespace, what is your 30-second elevator pitch definition of unified namespace?
It's an approach to collecting, connecting, and storing and contextualizing your data for the entire organization, the enterprise. Typically comes from a site point of view by most modern definitions, but is not limited to that. But really, it's the approach to how you are architecting and piping that data from the edge and making it accessible to other consumers in the ecosystem, the enterprise.
This is why you say, depending on your perspective, you have multiple things that could be considered edge.
Yes. And with that, you have multiple things that could or could not be considered a UNS.
That does make sense now more so why when, people say, and admittedly Walker says this, UNS is everywhere. That does make more sense because you have UNSs at almost not every layer, but you have UNSs at different layers. Like you said, that Ignition tag server is the UNS at the plant level. And then the data, because also some people would call HiByte, a UNS. I guess if it's just an approach, what is this to kind of put you on the spot? If it's just an approach, then why is it on the architecture why do we label it as that? And
at the risk of stepping on the toes of the ProveIt conference, semantics, it's buzzwords. It's what the conference is built around.
It's the place where we're normalizing, contextualizing the entire plant data at the enterprise.
Yep. And at this point, it's not just the plant, it's all the plants.
multiple plants are going to be aggregated together at that enterprise layer.
Yep. So this is the true UNS by our definitions for this enterprise, the multi-site enterprise we're going to be talking about for the virtual factory of the ProveIt conference. If you ask different people, this might be a UNS, the ignition tag server. You might have a UNS as HiByte here, being that engine. You might have the enterprise UNS as we're discussing it. And when we get over here, Litmus might even have its own UNS as well. And some would say that Fuze is a UNS. So depending on who you ask, at the risk of overcomplicating it, there's too many definitions. So we're just going to stick with this.
So that is the ProveIt UNS.
This is the UNS right here.
Got it.
But depending on how you want to frame it, that's where it gets
and to be technical, this is the infrastructure that's provided by the ProveIt conference.
Yes, right here. This is
that all of the other vendors are also. This is the part we didn't. This is the part I didn't say.
Yep.
That all of the other vendors, all like 50 of them, are going to be connecting to as well, showing off their applications. All these other vendors are also doing their ProveIt sessions. We're showing our own implementation of all of these vendors stapled together.
Yep. So with that, that's how we got our data to the UNS. I would still consider this blue data. To overuse analogies and go to Ricardo, this would be silver, but we're still calling it blue. And if we want to get into our red or our gold data, that's where we bring Fuze in. This is where we get the multi-site enterprise capabilities. They do the hosting for you. They have all the management. They've built the systems. They've secured it. They have all of it done for you. And this is where you model your enterprise data inside of Fuze.
Okay, I take it back. I actually do kind of like the analogy of gold data, especially at the enterprise layer. And the thought of the gold data lives in Fuze because it really does, because that's where the valuable data is.
Yes.
That's where the enterprise insights that you can gain by, as Craig said, you have that single set of instructions, or that you define the DNA. This is your plant's, this is really kind of like your entire enterprise's single source of truth. And particularly more so around the relational data, MES, all of those different S's, WMS, QMS, MES. That's all of those applications would live inside of Fuze.
Yep. And I guess before we jump into Fuze here, I'm going to answer a question from chat before we get too far removed from the HiByte conversation. There was the question of the advantages or disadvantages of using HiByte over Flow software. And this is where I think it's an and not or in most case scenarios, is HiByte is much better as the ETL tool, where we're going to extract data, transform it, model it, and load it into something else like the UNS broker, where Flow software is much more of the analytics engine, where we're taking data at rest and contextualizing it and doing KPIs and calculations and analytics. So I like HiByte for data that's in motion, ETL, and Flow software for data that's at rest.
Well, and it's not, you're also, if you're looking, I see it here now, it's very easy to see. The result set of Flow information platform that takes those time series data, generates KPIs. It takes not only time series data from the edge, but it also takes time series data from other disparate data sources. So like, let's say you have a Pi historian or a Wonderware historian, you can connect, or a time-based historian, the free historian that they created. You could connect all of those different data sources, model the data together, create KPIs, and then those KPIs will then be published back to the infrastructure, where then it'll be modeled into HiByte, which will then be elevated up until your enterprise.
Yep. And that's where we're going to get into Fuze here. So with Fuze, now we have the multi-site enterprise application. This will take a little bit of an introduction because I think less people are likely to be familiar with it than Ignition and some of these other tools. But Fuze is to the enterprise what Ignition was to the site. So if Ignition was built as a SCADA platform doing MES functionality and growing into an IoT platform, Fuze is an enterprise app living in L3, your MES, your WMS, your supply chain, that type of application. It started as an iPaaS for those that are on the IT side who will be familiar with, and grew into this platform that does more. So on the surface, there might be a lot of overlap in features when you're thinking about Ignition versus Fuze, but they exist for very different purposes and are built in very different ways that complement each other rather than compete. So Fuuz is your platform, your Swiss Army knife for enterprise apps, in the same way that Ignition is that Swiss Army knife and that platform for the plant floor.
Ooh, I like that. I really like that. And that in gold data, I really like.
Yes. So with that, we'll talk about.
Lopa, real quick, Lopa, are you, or is anyone, if you're coming to the ProveIt conference, let us know in the chat. We'd love to see you there.
Yes, and we might be going a little long here, so bear with us or watch the recording. And we're happy to stick around and answer any questions as long as there's an audience to ask them. But going into the Fuuz architecture here, Fuuz is a cloud application, multi-tenant, and you build your applications on it in the cloud. But it also has an edge gateway that lives on site that can run applications and functions locally with full store and forward with AMQP and other pipelines connecting between them. So this is your enterprise link to the site, where this is your more fluid. So if we're going, this is your blue namespace, this is your red namespace. And once we get into this, Fuuz is where we're going to start talking about how do we integrate with the ERP system, with your PLM system. And I'm throwing a bunch of acronyms out here. But this is where we integrate with all of the enterprise applications and softwares. But also, not only is it where we integrate, it's not just an integration platform, it's also a platform we can build applications and functions on top of. So we could build a enterprise grade, very consistent, contextualized, and modeled MES that is very strict with rules and DevOps and version control in the cloud that may or may not compete with the MES that's on the edge on the site level. But because we have both, we allow the site to solve their own problems with your local MES and your blue namespaces and your blue applications, while the enterprise has its consistent has its consistent data and consistent pipelines in Fuuz to get all the data that the enterprise needs. And then it has connections to the UNS in the cloud where we can start to get more and more context, more and more information. We lose a little bit of control over genealogy of the data when we go through the UNS in the cloud at the enterprise level here due to some of the things with MQTT. But that's also why we have this pipe down here that is a lot harder and a lot more rigid.
And what does that mean, real quick? Because that even went over my head.
Yeah.
So I think I understand, but you said you lose control of the genealogy of the data.
So once the data is, once we're down here, I know that this this tag provider, this namespace in the edge gateway is this tag provider and this tag server. And I know that that's where, and HighByte can get it. So we can know in HighByte that the data came from this gateway. We can know in HighByte that the data came from this database or this historian. And from there, we can have that information passed to Fuuz in a way that we can know where the data came from. And then through Fuuz's connection to itself, it maintains that context. Once we publish it from HighByte to the UNS, now we have to talk about implementation patterns, because you could architect it in a way that you can have all that as part of the packet. But the question often comes down to, can you, should you, and do you? We don't know where the data came from once it hit the UNS. So there's a lot of power in opening doors and making things interoperable, but there's a trade-off there. So by doing it this way, we have the best of both worlds.
This is one of the things that people complain about MQTT specifically is, it's really flexible, that there's really flexible on the payloads, but then, and there's no standard, but then the downside is there's no standard. And so you end up having to engineer solutions on top of the standard.
Yes, and we can enforce standards in Fuuz in our red namespace applications and keep things loose, fluid, and open on the UNS and our blue namespaces. And we can share our red to the broker, and other things can use that data. But that also means that we maintain all of the things that make that data valid and viable for future things in Fuuz as we pipe this out to things like Google BigQuery or other data warehouses.
Dude, I'm freaking stoked to see the data. All right. What else within the architecture do you want to highlight?
Yes. So 2 more things, and I'll go a little bit faster, not because they're less important, but because we're running out of time, is on site B, we're doing a thing where maybe we didn't need full interfaces. We didn't need full operator control. We didn't need a SCADA or an MES. We just need to collect data from the site. And so a different integrator or a different entity, which is us for the sake of the demo, but we're simulating what happens when multiple sites happen on their own, decided that they just needed the data out. We wanted to connect to it. We used the device connectivity of Litmus Edge, and Litmus did everything we needed for this site. So that's all we have. And for better and for worse, depending on the trade-offs and the functionality you needed, we've got data piping to our UNS. And Litmus Edge is doing all of that perfectly. It's connecting to the edge controllers, to your Opto22, to your Rockwell, your Siemens, all your PLCs and your robots and everything, and piping it up to the broker. But we don't have any enterprise grade applications here that's like Fuuz. We don't have a good connection where it's straight through. So one thing we can do here is put an edge gateway for Fuuz right here. And then we can take this and bring it in right there. And now we have built on top of, without affecting the greenfield or the brownfield location. Now we can pipe this edge gateway to our enterprise app alongside our UNS, and we have full traceability in genealogy and context in both our red and our blue namespaces. So that's our plan on site B, where we're pretending we're coming in on a brownfield or a site that didn't want all the extra features of the SCADA and the MES. They just wanted data now. And then the last function is CMMS. A lot of people in our space forget that maintenance exists, and we're not going to do that. So we're showing you how to put an enterprise-grade CMMS, maintenance management system, on top of both sites at the enterprise level that can trigger work orders, alerts, and flows to the maintenance team and go from there. And we're using MaintainX for that. Not shown here is Google BigQuery and all of the data warehouse side. And as I said before, some of our other partners to be announced as we add more problem statements that we solve. So zooming back out real quick, we've got two sites, site A and site B, very different architectures, very different levels of functionality and requirements being contextualized within our enterprise UNS broker and our enterprise MES application that can then consistently integrate with our ERP and our financial KPIs, where we can build a WMS and all of that.
Yeah, I love that you said and I think we're good on sharing the screen now. Well, we can bring it back up if you have any specific questions. We'll go maybe a few minutes long. We can answer a few questions, so just drop them into the chat, or if you're watching the recording. I love how you said we don't forget maintenance, because our co-founder Glenn, who's not with us today, he is a maintenance and reliability expert. He's also like a finance and executive level guy, which is that's why he's going to be presenting at the ERP to Factory Floor webinar, where we're going to be diving even deeper. We're going to be co-presenting with Fuuz to dive even deeper within Fuuz. So there'll be a link below to sign up for that. But shout out to Glenn. I know he's going to crush that webinar because he brings that expertise. Like we get a little technical on this webinar. That one's going to be like, why does all of this data, like what information will that drive decisions that's going to make a difference on the bottom line at the end of the day? Yeah. What are those levers, not only from the entire organization, but even within each department? Like what motivates the CIO? What motivates the COO? I mean, from Glenn's personal experience as the president of a manufacturing facility, he's seen it all. So that's where Glenn kind of fits in, who we're excited to have. So make sure you register for that. It won't be an open live. It'll be by registration only. So there'll be a link below to register for that. But Dylan.
Yeah, so I guess in absence of any other comments in there, I'm going to ask some of the questions that I've been asked already, as I've showed other people the earlier versions of this architecture. Just to hit a couple common questions we get is, the first one is, this is too complicated. And the second one is, there's too many vendors. And the answer to that is, this is the art of the possible trade show demo for ProveIt. The real world version of this is probably going to have 2 or 3 vendors, maybe 4 if you have that level of functionality, but it's not going to be 10, 20, 100 vendors. We're going to get that down to 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 at the most. Try to get that vendor stack as low as possible, that while still meeting the needs and requirements, so that the end users can maintain, manage, and have relationships with not only integrators who know those vendors, not only us, but also with the vendors themselves, which reduces risk of lock-in outside of the vendor ecosystem, but in the integrator ecosystem as well. Cost is going to be dependent on all of the how many ignition gateways do we need, which modules need to exist on each of those, which problem we're solving. Do we need a real scale-out architecture on the ignition MES front end? Do we need one front end, two end front end, 5 front ends? That's going to depend on how many users we have. It's going to depend on how many sites and which tools we really need at the end of the day for you. So we're going to have for ProveIt the very detailed cost of this stack, the software licensing, and the time it took us to build this. But we're also going to be able to work with you to get at least some hip shot estimates of what your smaller, more condensed version of this would cost on the floor. The other one that I got all the time is once we start talking these enterprise solutions, what happens if the cloud fails? And that's where you start using protocols and technologies like Fuuz that have this built in, the store and forward piece. So what if the cloud fails? What if your VM cluster on site fails and your machines are still running on the edge gateway? It's all the same different pieces, the same points of failure, just abstracted at different levels. So by utilizing things with store and forward and utilizing tools in a way that allows you to not lose data when something goes offline, that's why we have the UNS architecture. That's why we have multiple ignition gateways. That's why the databases are structured how they are. And that's the risk we're mitigating there.
I love it.
Then what could go wrong? Some of the stuff that could go wrong is maybe some of these third-party modules aren't ready. Maybe they haven't been updated to Ignition 8.3 yet, or things like that. Maybe we misanticipated an issue or a problem statement that the customer would have once we find the data coming in, and we need to rearrange the stack. And that's where we just need to remain fast, remain agile, and not dig our heels in. We don't want to assume the problems. We've come up with this toolbox that we can use to solve these problems. But once we see the actual data, the actual factory, then we can cater the actual legitimate architecture that we're actually going to use at the end of the day to those problem statements. And then the last one that we kind of get is, what if we're not ready for this? This is a lot of things to take in. It's a lot of software. Maybe we don't have the expertise on site yet. And the end user gets a little bit overwhelmed by the choices out there. And that organizational readiness is what we do at Avalara. We've got workshops, we've got conversations, we can come on site, we can train your guys on everything that you need to do to make all of this work. Whether that's us coming in and doing implementations for you, whether it's us finding a best-in-class partner for your specific vertical, or whether it's us coming on site and just training your staff or doing a workshop to teach you the art of the possible and point you in the right direction, that's where you can call us for help.
Excellent. Yeah. And this is also why I love ProveIt, because you get to see the best of the best industrial software vendors, or as some people say, ISVs, in one place, all working together, an environment that we would never otherwise actually see. Like if you were to go to software vendor A, they're going to tell you what the perfect stack with just software vendor A looks like. If you go to software vendor B, they're going to show you a software vendor B stack. And maybe they'll show you, maybe they have partners or connectors, but we're showing you the full stack, the full art of the possible, which is really the spirit of the ProveIt conference. Also, as you guys can tell, Dylan's a fucking expert. So excuse my language, but if you guys want to hear the truth, Dylan will tell you the truth. If you guys want to have the ideal architecture for your specific needs, there will be a link below to book a call. It's really easy to engage with us, whether it's a free 30-minute call that you want to talk about architecture with Dylan, and that solves your problem, and that's all you need, that's great. If you need help on implementation or architecture, we have digital transformation, maturity assessment workshops. We also have our own Avalara Ascent methodology. It's both a top-down and a bottom-up consulting and architecture engagement where we get hands-on with leadership and on plant floor personnel. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm so excited to be doing this live stream because for the first 2 months working at Avalara, I was working behind the scenes. And some of you guys might have noticed I was doing like this daily vlog series, like building a value-added reseller to over $1 million in revenue. Well, we haven't hit it yet, but we are into the multiple, like plus five. We're almost at like 5 figures of revenue. 6 figures of revenue. The numbers are all going in my head. Like we've got revenue on the board. We're chalking up wins. We're not at 7 figures yet, but we will be hitting that like next year if things go right. But my point there was I haven't been posting the last 2 weeks because things kind of came to a front and people are like, wait, where'd you go? Like, did you get fired or something? Like, no, I've been hands down, head down working. After we went to the Fuuz, 2 weeks ago, we went to the Fuuz headquarters and we just created a bunch of content and interviews. Like we've been posting a lot of content, and so we just got so busy in the last 2 weeks. I haven't really had time to prioritize it. It served its purpose. It worked well, actually. A lot of people were reaching out to me trying to, start engagements. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it like a failure, but I did want to update you guys because, I did share, hey, it's the cat's out of the bag. I'm working for Avalara. That's the value added reseller. We've got a really, stacked team, as you can tell. And I'm really excited for, obviously the ProveIt conference. And again, if you aren't attending the ProveIt conference, why not? Because you got to be there. If you're a manufacturing end user, you get a 50% discount, and it would take you a lot longer to go evaluate all of these solutions independently. You can go to the ProveIt conference, evaluate them all in one place in 1 week, and then you'll be on your way with an architecture. So
yeah, and I guess to wrap up real quick then on my side is I went way too technical in this webinar, but that was the audience we were looking for. We're trying to prove it on the technical chops. That's what this conference means. But just a couple weeks ago, I was speaking at another conference and didn't say a single thing that was technical. It was all about people and culture. And that's what separates Avalara, I think, from most everybody else is it's people, it's culture, it's process, and then it's technology. So we'll find the right tools for the right people that are in your organization that support your processes. And we'll recommend the best tools that we believe will work for you. And if you're a small manufacturer, that might still be a clipboard or an Excel sheet. And if you're an enterprise looking to scale, that might be a full Fuse and a full IT-centric ecosystem with all sorts of cool technology. And it could probably be anywhere in the middle. So we are here to meet you where you are, and more importantly, meet your people where they are.
And if you want to help support us,
yeah,
if you can go directly to these vendors and just tell them Avalara sent you. It helps support the content we create. It allows us to help support you. You can get on the phone with us. You can get on the phone with Dylan and get that support that you need. Like I said, we have varying levels of support for architecture or even implementation, through and even scale out through our integrator partners. But that's kind of the one thing that's different about the value added reseller model is we've went and forged all these relationships with all of these partners. So to help better serve our mission, which is to help solve problems at the end of the day and serve the end user in service of,
Yep. And the last one I want to add is if you are any of the vendors that we talked about in the stack and you're working at ProveIt, we came up with the stack before all the vendor list was announced. But if anybody wants to collaborate, we're open. So give us a call, hit us up, and we're here to work with you. Because
we are not being paid by any vendor to put this stack together. This is our honest stack. If we are being paid by, if you go to a vendor that we referred you to, we do get a commission. So if we are being paid, we will say we do take sponsorships, or we do take paid product reviews. We do paid architecture for vendors as well too. So we do have, but like we're always about transparency here. So this is our honest stack that we put together based on our experience in the industry.
Yep. So if you're going to ProveIt or you are looking to go to ProveIt, we'll have the link in the description on the recording of this on YouTube. Use code Avalara at the checkout for a discount. And you can look for the spelling in the channel name right below the video. Like and subscribe and all that in the future. And yeah.
See you guys. Thanks.